a este Madrid Platform, realmente, como su nombre lo indica, una plataforma de los negocios. Para Colombia, Madrid es una ciudad muy importante. Es el acceso nuestro a España y a la Unión Europea,
In
pero a la vez
Colombia, this is
también es
the
el
access
acceso
to
de
Spain
muchas
and
empresas
to the
españolas
European Union,
a Colombia.
and also the other way
Tenemos
around
este
for
año
many
más de
Spanish
500 empresas
companies
españolas
to
invirtiendo en nuestro
Colombia.
país
We have more
y
than
esperamos que a
500
través de estos
such
eventos y
companies
estas plataformas
investing,
esa presencia
and
pueda crecer
hopefully
más.
through this platform and
Particularmente ahora
initiative,
que
this
estamos
will
en una
be
época de
on the
recuperación,
increase, especially now that we
saliendo
are
del
on the
COVID,
road to
comenzando
recovery,
a crecer nuevamente con expectativas
exiting the
importantes de
pandemic,
crecimiento.
and
Colombia está en
with
crecer cerca
important
del
growth
5%,
rates. This
lo que nos
year,
hace muy
about
positivos de
5%
este
growth.
futuro que viene
So we
pasada la
are
pandemia.
hopeful
Agradecemos a los
regarding our
organizadores
future.
y a todos
We
los
do thank
participantes
the
una bienvenida
organizers
muy
and all the
cálida y los
participants
esperamos en
for the
Colombia.
warm welcome, and we expect you here in Colombia. Thank you. Good afternoon. You heard Luis Guillermo Plata, ambassador of Colombia here in Spain, and this was his message to Madrid Platform, where Colombia wanted to be present in this international business hub between Europe and Latin America. So now we will be hearing the next speaker, Silverio Gómez Carmona, Director of the Commercial Office for Colombia, Spain, and Portugal. Welcome. Thank you. Thank you. I want to greet everyone in Spain and Europe, and good morning in Latin America. Apart from greeting you and thanking you for your patience, because you will be listening to the business opportunities and opportunities of a Latin American country like Colombia that has contact with two different masses of water. We have the Caribbean and the Pacific, and this communicates us with Asia. Very briefly, let me extemporate on something that I really must tell you about here. It has to do with the situation in Colombia. The pandemic has been very hard for us. It has hit us hard, and the path to recovery will be slow and long. So hopefully we will be going back to what we had in 2019. But what is clear is that nobody, neither in Europe, nor in Asia, nor in Africa, nor in America, is that nobody is losing something as important as hope. Economic recovery is asymmetric, even among developed countries, even more so in emerging economies, among which some of the Latin American countries like Brazil, Mexico, Argentina, Chile, and Colombia can be counted. Colombia is a young country. 75% of our population, of 50 million inhabitants, that is 37 million inhabitants, are less than 45 years old. So it's a young country compared to Spain and Italy, where 20 or 22% of the population is aged 65 plus or 68 plus. So we have 37 million people in Colombia that are younger than 45. And that does mean opportunities for the future. And 50% of that population belongs to what we call the middle class, that aspires every day to new opportunities and better chances for life. So the pandemic has hit everyone hard. Obviously, this is stating the obvious. It has hit the wealthy and the poor alike, but especially the ones that are lower down in the pyramid, and their demands are very valid, and the future of our democracies is linked to these problems. And here's where the concept of hope comes into the picture, hoping that there'll be inclusion and better opportunities for well-being and for a better life. In 2020, we had a contraction in our economy of about 7%. The GDP that measures wealth fell by 7%, but it was below the average of the corresponding number in Latin America. Even Spain had an average drop by this count of about 10%. And by 2021, we expect an increase of GDP of 5% and a corresponding number also for the next year, for 2022. But this cold concept of numbers, 5, 7, 10%, it reflects something dramatic in terms of opportunity. Colombia wasn't the one that lost out more, but we lost 1.4 million jobs in 2020 in Colombia, and that is stark. But by now, 1 million of these jobs has been recovered. The pandemic has associated public expenditure, and thus the debt is estimated to have increased by 25 billion euros. These are resources that the government needs to finance. And that is why the government has addressed a fiscal reform that only intended to capture 5% of that 6 billion euros. A quarter of that, actually. And there was a reaction, but there are mafias that have to do with crime and drug trafficking located in very specific areas like the western part of Colombia. And we have also the Venezuelans, 2.5 million, who have come to Colombia. 2.5 million are more than, for example, people living in the Basque Country. And think of the border between Venezuela and Colombia. It's a very long border of over 2,000 kilometers. That would be equivalent to what you need to travel from Bilbao to Cadiz. So this is our common border, and this makes control extremely difficult. Okay, so Colombia doesn't have the capacity to absorb that huge quantity of people, and definitely not alone. But there are political groups, there are stakeholders that want to reap benefits vis-à-vis next year's presidential elections, where President Iván Duque will stand for re-election. And this has been abused and used by other groups that have a very important political responsibility. So it's a question of political gain, not so much economic gain. Until yesterday, about 1,000 intermittent blockages, road blockages, had taken place in the whole country. 10 minutes, a quarter of an hour, 1 hour. When security forces arrive, the people in question retire, or they engage in violence with the public security forces that need to respond to an aggression on the part of these groups in order to defend the collective interest that has to do with mobility and with the transportation of goods, and even oxygen that is needed badly in the hospitals where COVID patients lie, and trucks and vehicles that move around transporting foodstuffs, for example, in order to cater for the needs in the cities. So the security forces intervene, there are clashes, and these groups systematically want to showcase the world that Colombia, that the public authority is repressive and is pointing the finger at Colombia as a aggressor. But what is more, in the last 6 days, more than 350 shops have been broken into, and also banks and the teller machines have been destroyed, and the state can't simply say, hey, don't do that. You need to react, as you do everywhere, in the US, in Spain, and even in the Vatican, to give you an example. So to date, almost everything is back to normal, and the state is in a dialogue with Pacific protesters, including students, unions, teachers, entrepreneurs, farmers. I mean, this is cross-cutting through the whole society, and it is to be expected that in the coming hours there'll be no more protests that obviously have impact, economic and social. So please excuse me, I've wandered a bit off the script, but obviously I think it was to be expected that I needed to refer to the situation of public order that is of concern to us all. As things stand, I really do think that for Spanish business, that is so important for Colombia. This is of interest because Spain is the second investor in Colombia after the US. About 650 companies from Spain have interests in Colombia. There are Colombian companies that have an international presence and are present in Spain. After Mexico is the second ranking Latin American country in these terms. And now I go back to my script without wanting to disregard this issue that I thought was so important. I'm the director of ProColombia, the economic counselor in the embassy in Spain, with whom we do collaborate. And I would like to tell you about the opportunities for the business world. I'll be talking about investment climate, Colombia as destination for business and investment for many entrepreneurs. ProColombia is the entity that promotes foreign investment. I mean, there's Pro-Chile, Pro-Mexico, and in the case of Colombia, we have 3 pillars. Direct foreign investment to Colombia, coming from outside to Colombia. We foster non-mining, non-energy exports, no precious metals, but these are the different areas: agro-industry, fashion, chemical industry, and other industry. So ProColombia's job is to promote that. And also tourism. We try to attract tourists to Colombia that travel for leisure, for business, and that look for a new concept of well-being. Against the backdrop of the pandemic, this is going to be even more important for our country. Obviously, we can't expect in the short or medium term, we can't expect to have the 85 million tourists that arrive every year in Spain. Obviously, that is only a dream of ours for the time being, but it definitely is one of our aspirations. Now, what has Colombia to offer? I'm going to flesh this out. It's a responsible and committed government vis-à-vis health and economic revival. And what does this mean? It means that the chairman of the Entrepreneurs Association in Spain says that we do have a strategy that is vaccination, vaccination, and vaccination. The three elements that at the end of the day are only one, but that is the message. And we do likewise in Colombia after the Second World War, or during the World War. The only objective was to beat the enemy. And after that, we decide what we wanted to do. At the time, the goal was getting rid of Hitler. And now we have the pandemic. At the time, we had a conventional war. And now we have vaccination, vaccination, and more vaccination. So Colombia started the vaccination program within a national plan, vaccination plan that included 5 stages. Now we're in the 3rd stage. We've covered already 2 previous stages. At the beginning of vaccination, with only a few exceptions, like the States, the United Kingdom, and Israel, countries even in the European Union didn't have enough vaccines. In rich countries like France, Germany, and Italy had a scarcity of vaccines. Now, that has been overcome now. And the first month we had 1 million people vaccinated, and now we want to reach 12.9 million people vaccinated. And we're starting now with the age range from 50 to 59. So it's working. And what is our goal? Well, we want what everyone else wants, that by the end of the year 2021, we reach a vaccination level of 60%. That would be 35.7 million people with the vaccine, 72-73% of our population. Now, this is the objective, to reach herd immunity, which we all know is reaching that level of people with a vaccine that will stop the pandemic from progressing. Well, we've done as anybody else. With a low take-up due to the scarcity of available vaccines, we've gone through the whole process. Lockdown, gradual lockdown, protecting some population groups, preference for the SMEs, stimulating demand, case, for example, of eliminating VAT, and helping the people who are less well off, and vital subsidies, like what you call here in Spain, ingreso mínimo vital. That's the minimum income. So we've gone exactly along the same lines. Somebody said that we can't think only in terms of the past. We need to look into the future. So we need to recover. In 2020, we had, as I said, a drop of about 7%, but underneath the average in Latin America, our wealth suffered that drop, and the unemployment rate that before the pandemic was about 10%, reached 23% during the pandemic, and now we are at about 14%. And more specifically, this has meant a heavy toll for people who have lost their jobs. But Colombia has grown consistently during 50 years, and almost by 6.9% is the factor by which we have grown. Chile, 6.7%, Mexico by 5%, and Argentina, unfortunately, has multiplied by 2.9 during these last 5 decades. And the forecast is that Colombia, in the medium term, is going to be the most stable economy. In 21, we're going to grow by 5%, and in 22, we will have a growth rate that is equivalent. So price stability is very important. Inflation rate that shows stability. Now, the second element has to do with political stability. Colombia stands out internationally in comparison to the other Latin American countries as a country that is committed to business, to private business. And there are a number of indicators that I'm not going to explain here, but that show how well positioned we are in order to promote, to boost this activity. We do have the lowest hurdles to foreign direct investment in all Latin America, and the government is committed to the private sector, and these are the indices of regulatory restrictions. Colombia is among the lowest in the ranking in this sense.
After the pandemic, Colombia is developing a strategy to relocalize companies in Colombia. Companies are looking to try and bring companies back home because they want to try and stay away from the remote distances. And so we are well positioned in terms of this relocalization, this concept of nearshoring, which means bringing companies from other countries to Colombia. And this is a very important indicator because Colombia offers an preferential terms of entry to 97% of the countries in the region. And it means they're a very attractive destination for relocalization. And I wanted to show you that we have preferential access, which combines with logistical advantages. For example, the distance in miles if we look at New York from Colombia, it takes 6 days to go from the home port to the Colombian port. It's 23 days from Argentina, 22 days from Mexico. For example, if we have Buenaventura, for example, it's 33 days to reach Buenaventura from Argentina. In addition, Colombia has one of the most competitive air fleets, and Bogota in particular is the most competitive airport for flights to the US from Latin America. And so the cost of air freight is $1.12 per kilo to the US from Colombia. And this is a huge competitive advantage for us compared to our neighboring countries. Equally, Colombia has a whole region of free trade areas, which are also a huge attraction for investment. And the most important feature here is that after the Dominican Republic, we have the highest number of free trade zones. And so this means there's a substantial reduction in taxes for companies located in these areas where trade can enter into the country. And this is a huge advantage. And the taxes in Colombia, along with Mexico, are the lowest in the region, particularly in these free trade areas. We don't charge customs duty, and in our zone, these free trade zones, there is exemption on the VAT, and there is an exemption on customs duty for people using the free trade zone. And this combines with a gradual reduction in income tax, mega investments, which is a very important concept, which any investment of over $350,000 in the free trade areas is exempt from tax for a period of 10 years. And the fourth reason why Colombia is an attractive destination is because it has a developed technological ecosystem with the standards that are needed for recovery after COVID-19. And this infrastructure means that we're the fourth biggest market in Latin America for IT. 98% of Colombian towns are connected using fiber optic cables to the outside world, and there are 11 underwater cables, meaning that 66% of the population is using the internet, with around 32.7 million of people using the internet in Colombia. And Colombia has a network that few countries in Latin America can boast. Now, without any doubts, we are a young country with 66% of the population aged less than 45, and we hold fourth place with our in terms of digital competencies in the workforce. We have talent and innovation, and this, and as we say that a photo says more than 1,000 words, I think you can see that we agree with the World Economic Forum, which is saying that we have a number of graduates that is similar to, it is a very substantial number of graduates. Now, China leads the world in FDI in terms of developing and emerging countries, and we are in 9th place in Colombia. In 2019, before COVID, foreign direct investment presented a growth of 24.1% in Colombia compared to investment, and this was in investment in sectors other than energy and mining. And now alternative energy sources are coming to Colombia. Technological services linking to these sectors are coming to Colombia as well. And not just traditional sectors of banking and finance and telecommunications, as has happened in Spain, for example, with Telefónica, or the Bilbao Bank and Santander, but now other sectors are coming as well. Colombia is becoming a major destination for energy investment from Spain, for example, and investment in health with Spanish companies coming to Colombia, and the hotel sector as well, not just through tour operators, but also with direct investment from Spanish companies in tourism and in technological services as well, and in 4.0 technologies. And this graphic illustrates the companies that are present in Colombia and are leaders in their sectors, and in recent years have invested in Colombia. And as I've said since the beginning, Colombia has more than 650 Spanish companies invested in Colombia. And there are sectors such as agri-industry which offer huge opportunities, and they're looking for Spanish companies are investing in technological development, and Colombia can participate as a partner in these initiatives and bring in third-party capital to invest in these markets and invest in the Spanish and the European markets. And I think that people are making signs at me now. I think I've reached the end of the time that was allocated to me. So thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much for being here with us today, for all of these explanations that you've been giving us. I'm looking for my notes, because you talked about the situation in Colombia. You've sort of anticipated our questions. We're a little bit concerned about this, because even also for investors, this is one of the general preoccupations, not just with Colombia, but the region as a whole is a source of concern. This is one of the criticisms that are being made. Yes, I understand. This is a valid point. We're defending private property and our social values. When I am referring to the actions of the police, we're talking about the collective well-being, and that there are groups who have political interests, and if they attack 350 commercial entities or premises, this is nothing to do with ideology. This is something that the police have to, and the state has to respond to. And 62 investigations are currently underway by the authorities in Colombia against the police who may have used excessive force against citizens. But this is a general subject. If you look at Chile, until just a few months ago, there was a big uprising as well. In Ecuador, the protests started because of a rise in the price of petrol. So last Friday, one of the main sources of energy in the US, one of the biggest oil companies, was attacked. So this is a subject which is not limited to Colombia. It's an international situation. And I think each country is entitled to defend itself. Obviously, you said I have a carte blanche to ask you questions. So another thing that we saw in the figures is that more than 26 people have died in these protests. And it sets our hair on end, no? And 400 people that have disappeared. Do you have plans about this? Let me give you some details. In the last 10 days, 47 people have died. 22 of these people were implemented in questions of public order, demonstrations. And of the 5 million people that were demonstrating, 22 people have died. In 20 of the cases where there is no direct relation with the demonstrations, there are 7 or 8 cases which are currently being investigated. These are the figures. The question of the disappeared are accusations that have been made, but sincerely, it takes a while to classify someone as a disappeared person. There needs to be an investigation before they can be definitively described as a disappeared person. But I would just like to repeat that in Colombia, when they have attacked 350 businesses, 200 banks, this is not ideology. And the question is, what is the reaction of the police force? When the government says that constitutionally military assistance from the army to assist in these situations, we can say that even in Spain you can have the army helping out on the streets and nobody says that this is a terrible thing to do. So these claims any complaints are being investigated by the appropriate authorities. Okay, let's now look at something else now. A question of safety and security, because all investors need to feel that there's safety and that their investment is safe. And that President Duque says that the population is remembering the reform on taxation on businesses that was carried out 2 years ago. Now, if you're looking to invest in Colombia, is the market capable of handling these products and services? We offered tax incentives to companies. With the pandemic, what we initially saw was that these stimuluses remained in place, but maybe most of the funding should not have gone to companies. It's people who need and so we raised taxes to the population, and as everybody knows, there's only 2 things that are sure in life, tax and death, and the population were not happy with the new taxes, and we need to try and resolve this, but calmly. And so the government withdrew this reform. But the protests continue. And this reminds me of Chile. There were similar protests in Chile, and similarly in Ecuador, when oil prices rose, petrol prices. But there are no new tax reforms in Colombia. I'm not the best person to answer this, but the pandemic has generated huge costs of around 20 billion euros. And we're short now of these resources. How are we going to finance this spending? We don't have the advantage of European Union countries where you have the European Central Bank that can bail you out, which has provided billions and billions of euro of support to Spain or to Portugal, which has received 46 billion euros in assistance. Colombia does not have these sources of assistance. The Spanish economy and the Spanish government is able to raise money because it has the constant support of the European Central Bank. We do not have this advantage to find funding from the markets with this underwriting. So Spain can spend more than 100% of its GDP or owe this equivalent of money. In Colombia, our debt against our GDP is 65% because we don't have the same resources that the European countries have for accessing the financial markets. Now, we're going to keep talking because there's lots of things to talk about. And I know you're an economist, and it's very interesting for us to be able to talk to you about this, but maybe we can just leave a message for everybody that's watching us today. Yes. The pandemic is not symmetrical, but the solution is symmetrical. The pandemic has had effects on all countries, rich and poor countries. We thought that America was one of the worst countries to have managed the pandemic. And India was doing really well with the pandemic. Now the situation has completely changed. But the solution is symmetrical. We have set game rules in Colombia. We encourage national and foreign investment in Colombia. And if you come to Colombia, you can be sure that your goods and your assets will be protected, because this is how Colombia has always acted. Colombia has always maintained a very clear line with regards to promotion, incentives, and guaranteeing fixed rules of the game. So for anyone that wants to come and invest in Colombia, Silverio Gomez Carmona, the director of the Oficina Comercial Pro Colombia for Spain and Portugal, thank you very much for being with us. Thank you very much for being here in this last afternoon of Madrid Platform. In a few minutes, we'll be back with Poland. Thank you.